Hey everyone, Ryan with Raijin Radio here. This is my very first podcast, so go easy on me. While talking to myself is not exactly uncommon, this is my first time ever talking to myself and being recorded for the purposes of your entertainment. So, yeah, hopefully this goes well. Hopefully it won't be a total train wreck. If everything goes well, I should have more of these coming. So I'm going to start off with something that was actually quite near and dear to my heart. Obviously, Japan. A lot of you who know me know that I'm very into Japan and Japanese culture. And today, what we're going to talk about is actually the Japanese drinking culture. And there's some common misconceptions and actually some etiquette that a lot of people don't really know about it. So we're going to break that down. I've got some bullet points here so I don't get too off topic. And I don't know how long this is going to be. I don't know how long podcasts are really supposed to last, so I'm just going to keep jabbing at you until I pretty much feel like I'm done talking. So, let's get started with the first bullet point here. So, Japan is actually very loose in certain areas, obviously, when it comes to drinking in public. So, what do I mean by that? Let's say here in America, you're walking down the street and you got a beer in your hand, you're drinking it, and if you're not in Las Vegas, you might be in trouble. Uh, in Japan, it's really not that big of a deal to see somebody drinking in public. In fact, the thing that people tend to frown upon more than the drinking in the public issue is people walking and drinking at the same time. It's seen as rude and you're not being courteous to others because you're not paying attention to those around you. So, what I mean by that is you can literally walk into a convenience store and buy a beer and sit on the bench out front of the convenience store and drink that beer. And, people will walk by you. Some people might look at you a little bit funny, but nobody's really going to say anything. The only people that would say something are foreigners who'd be like, oh man, it's 9 a.m. Do you really need to be drinking? Mind your own business. Anyways, so that brings me to the drinking age. How old do you have to be to drink in Japan? Well, their drinking age is actually a little bit more lax than America. Here it's 21. In Canada, I think it's 19 or something like that. And in Japan, it's 20. Seemed like a nice, even number, I suppose. No, I don't know why it's 20. I'm sure there's some long list of, you know, legal reasons for that. But either way, 20 is the legal drinking age there. So, how do you go about buying alcohol and proving your age when you're a foreigner and you do not have a Japanese way of identification, so like a ID or something like that? Uh, Frankly, you kind of don't really need to prove it. At least in my case. Now, most of you have seen me in person or you see my photos on Facebook. I'm 30 years old. I look like I'm 30 most of the time. Sometimes I look like I'm 47, but that just depends on how much I'm stressed out. Now, usually when you go into a convenience store and the cashier rings up your beer, your alcohol, whatever, there's a little button prompt that shows up on the touchpad that basically says bunch of Japanese kanji, and then you see the number 20. And basically you push that to say, yes, I am in fact over the age of 20, therefore I am legally allowed to purchase this. Can somebody who's younger than that kind of abuse that system, who's a foreigner? Yeah, I don't recommend it because, well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't recommend being in a Japanese jail overnight. Anyways, so let's talk about being drunk in Japan, which I have done. Um, and there's some stories with that. And if I'm feeling up to it after I'm done with these bullet points, I might give you a couple of those stories. However, when we're talking about being drunk in Japan, it's not seen, as I said before, as a negative thing. Believe it or not, in Japan has a very strong drinking culture. So people being out and getting drunk, that's just kind of, the Japanese look at it as like, man, that guy must have had a hard day at work. Go for it, bro. Do you. Whereas over here, we're like, man, that dude's about to fall down. But they also tend to be more responsible when they drink. And what I mean by that is, I spent a decent amount of time in Japan. And before I continue, let me just tell you that I am by no means an expert in everything. These are my experiences, and these are everything I'm about to go over is things that I have learned from personal experience and from testimony of my friends in Japan. Anyways, so when people get drunk in Japan, they usually do it kind of while still thinking about others. Like, I never once saw a fight in Japan, despite what, anime and video games will tell you. No, not everybody gets, slightly drunk and brushes by a dude and then somebody beats the ever living hell out of him. That doesn't really happen there. Maybe in some of the more kind of shady areas, but not from what I noticed. People are actually quite polite there, even when they drink, and in some cases more so when they drink. So, you'll see somebody get kind of drunk, and then actually what happens is, if they have friends with them, their friends will definitely take care of them. And that's not really that abnormal. I mean, obviously people do that here too, but it just kind of reinforces their sense of community. So what they do is they will take that person away from most of the public and just kind of try to sober them up and be like, hey, because they don't want that person to be an inconvenience to others. But as far as the driving and drinking and all that there, drinking and driving in Japan, for lack of a better term, yeah, it exists, but it's not very common. And there's a couple of factors that lead into that. So, number one, if you so much as sniffed alcohol and then got behind the wheel of a car in Japan and you got pulled over, oh boy, you are in for some trouble. So don't do that. Which, I mean, let's be honest, you really shouldn't be drinking and driving anyways. What the hell's wrong with you? Now, the other reason for that is, well, unless you're out in the countryside, I mean, why drive? Just take the subway everywhere. I mean, in Osaka, the entire time that I was there, and I am including the, several weeks over, 2017 and 2019 when I've been in Osaka, I think I've been in a car once, maybe twice. One time was a taxi because, well, I was in the middle of nowhere and the trains were already shut down, so I had to get from point A to point B. So yeah, there's that. So, yeah, you don't really see too many drunk drivers in Japan. I personally have never seen one. I would, imagine that if there were drunk driving instances, it would most likely be either foreigners or, foreign military personnel that were out in the town doing their thing. So, yeah. So, let's talk about the next bullet point here. Kampai. I'm sure you've heard that term. Kampai. Well, kampai means a couple of things in Japan. It could mean cheers, like how we do here. Hey, salute, cheers, slanja, all that, right? And yeah, that's what it means. But kampai has a literal term, which is bottom of glass. So once you get to know somebody really well in Japan, at least some of the drinking buddies that I've made over there, kampai, when you say kampai, they expect to see the bottom of your glass, which means you better drink that sucker. Obviously, doing that with beer and stuff, nice giant mug of beer, not as easy to do with, say, a whiskey shot or whatever. So, let's talk about liquor. Everybody seems to think that sake is like what you get at that sushi restaurant down the block. The little bottle, and sometimes they're hot, sometimes they're cold. Nobody ever knows if it's supposed to be hot or cold or whatever. That's so. I hate to break it to you, but the term sake is actually a catch-all term for alcohol. It doesn't mean that specific alcohol, not that rice wine or rice liqueur or anything like that. So when you hear someone say the word sake and they are Japanese, they're referring to alcohol in general. So yes, beer is considered sake. Whiskey is sake, so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, what you know of as sake is actually called Nihonshu in Japan. And basically, that breaks down to Nihon, which is Japanese, and then Shu, which I believe means liquor or wine or something like that. So essentially, it's Japanese wine or Japanese liquor. Um, what kind of liquors and stuff do they like there? Well, I'm going to be honest, they freaking love beer. I mean, boy, howdy, do they love beer. Um, so much so where in certain parts of, some of the seedier areas, you'll actually find beer vending machines. And I don't mean like, you go to this area and you put your money in and a little cup comes out and it pours this little beer. No, I mean like you can order, tall boys, 30-ounce beers and they come down, they're ice cold and they're ready to crack and go. And when you go to any restaurant in Japan, just about any of them, at a minimum, they've got, Coke, water, beer. you know, I mean, beer is very, very, very heavily consumed in Japan. Another thing that they really like is actually American liquor, believe it or not. So whiskey is very popular over there as well. And I personally, I'm not really a big fan of most American whiskey. I mean, Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, whatever. Yeah, meh. I tend to actually like the Japanese whiskeys myself. I like Yamazaki, Hibiki, Suntory, things like that, which the Japanese do like, and obviously they have their own national pride for that. Yeah, this is our drink, but we prefer the American whiskey. Like, oh, okay. I can't tell you how many times I would see somebody, drinking Jim Beam, just regular old, Jim Beam or Jack Daniels. Never really saw too many people drink Maker's Mark, but then again, I didn't live in a bar the whole time I was there, so, but I'm sure it happens. Wine, like red wine, white wine, stuff like that. That's usually stuff that you find at higher end bars, or, nicer restaurants. I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't terribly impressed with Japanese wine. They need to kind of work on that. But if it's anything like everything else they do, eventually it's going to be freaking awesome. So, let's say that you are out in a bar with a buddy. Let's say your buddy is Japanese, and you guys decide, hey, we're going to go ahead and split a bottle of Nihonshu. Why not? Cool, do that. So you do the polite thing. You saw it on TV. You're like, oh, they never pour their own glass. You always pour the glass for them, So you do that, and then they pour the glass for you, and you go, okay, well that was nice, but why'd they do that? See, the reason for that is it's basically seen as a reciprocation of the gratitude. So you pour the glass for me. I appreciate that. Thank you. Let me pour the glass for you. Do not pour the glass for people unless you're ready to drink, because as I learned one time, I had quite a bit to drink. I ended up pouring glasses for everybody at a bar. Now, it wasn't a big bar. It was about like an 8-seater bar, kind of, small thing. But I poured drinks for about 6 people, and then I got 6 drinks back. And that night... well, let's just put it this way. That night was interesting. So you have to be ready for that. So where are some of the places to go drink? Obviously, bars. Yes, you can go to a bar in Japan. They are freaking everywhere. Bars are more common there than they are here by a long shot. And a lot of times they're really small, and they're actually, some of them are quite hidden. Like I've seen some where you look at an office building and you look at it and you're like, oh man, they must do all kinds of important office work in there. And then on the 5th floor is a bar. You're like, wait, what? I've seen bars where literally the only way that you would know that there was a bar there is there's a teeny tiny little sign on the street, and then you look at it and then it says 2B, which means it's on the second basement area. So now you have to go down the stairs to get to that. And, like you just walk right by it. You never know. And I've also seen bars that were obviously out in the open, nice big fancy classy kind of bars. So they all have their own kind of flavor to them. I'll talk more about bars in a little bit, but another place that's really popular to get drinks is what's called an izakaya. So an izakaya is essentially a restaurant where you go and you drink a lot and you eat a lot of small plates. So if anybody's ever done tapas or tapa hopping, right? Any of my Navy friends out there have been to Rota. Um, it's kind of the same thing, actually. So a lot of times what will happen is people will go to an izakaya and they'll be there for an hour or two. They'll eat and drink, be merry, and then they'll pay their tab. They move on to the next izakaya, and then so on and so forth until basically the night is burned away. Um, with these izakayas, whenever you order food, it's usually fairly small plates. They don't, they're usually pretty good. I mean, things like grilled chicken, different pieces of the chicken. Some of you might be squeamish about that. Some of you might not. I'll cover Japanese food culture in a different podcast, but either way. But the one constant there is beer. Lots and lots of beer. You will consume a lot of beer in an izakaya. That just happens. One thing that you may notice there in the middle of the week, specifically on Thursdays, is you'll see a bunch of business people all huddled around a table at an izakaya, and they're getting friggin' hammered. And you're going, all right, well, that's cool. I mean, that's kind of like a Friday night thing for us. So they must have off the next day. And they don't. What you're witnessing is what's called nominikai, or nominikai, or what they call nominication. So essentially what that is, it's basically a team building exercise. So basically you go out with your, cell and your team, your group, and you all eat, drink, and be merry with each other, and the company actually pays the tab for that. And they do that to raise morale, because working in Japan can be oppressive, to say the least, especially if you're a salary man or salary woman over there. 16-hour days, 6 days a week, kind of rough sometimes. But the whole purpose of that is to go out there and essentially let loose, because if not, people would be going freaking postal over there all the time. So actually one thing that's not uncommon to see there is you'll have the group there, and they'll have a like a support or a supervisor of some sort, maybe over that group, and they will tell that guy exactly what they think of him, or company policy. And where that's kind of different from over here is, even if that manager holds a grudge against you for that, for what you said, they can't do anything about that, because what you said had alcohol involved, therefore could be completely thrown out. So people tend to use that to their advantage. But like I said, it's more of a team building exercise. So you all go out, you get drunk, and then you got to wake up early the next day and you sweat out the hangover together. Go team. Uh, but that's usually what you'll see on a Thursday night or so. As far as other kind of exercises like that, that's really the only one I've been privy to. I'm sure there are other ones out there, but that's the big one, at least from what the people have been, telling me when I was over there. Let's see here. I'm running down this list really quick, so I need to kind of pad this out a bit. Let's see here. Oh yeah, bars. Told you I was going to talk about that before. So, different types of bars. Now, just like America and other countries around the world, you have all kinds of bars. So like over here, you got dive bars, you got sports bars, you got, super high classy, nose in the air, only serves like top shelf martini bars, stuff like that. And it's the same in Japan. Exactly the same. The difference that you're going to find with the Japanese bars actually is based on the type of bar that it is when it comes to things like dress code and such. So, for example, a casual bar is exactly what it sounds like. You go there, your jeans and your t-shirt, and You light up a cigarette or whatever, you have your drinks, blah, blah, blah. You go to what they call an authentic bar. An authentic bar is essentially like a high-class bar. The kind of bar where you go in and everything's wood grain and the lights are kind of dim and they got more whiskey than anything else. That kind of place. And in those kind of bars, you usually don't see people that are not in suits, essentially. You might see some people that are somewhat business casual, but that's about as low as that dress code goes there. Several of the bars I've been to have actually been kind of a mix between those. One bar that I frequented when I was in Osaka was a bar called Bar Laughing. Which, by the way, if you ever go to Osaka, check that place out. That place is awesome. Anyways, Bar Laughing is actually a mix between a casual and an authentic bar. So what that means is, yes, it has the authentic bar vibe, but he's not going to throw you out for wearing jeans and a t-shirt. At least he didn't with me. But as far as those are concerned, there are some rules that you need to understand when it comes to bars. So there are etiquettes that can be seen as, good manners and bad manners. Excuse me. So what are some of the bad manners there? And how can you avoid being that foreigner that ruins everything or the one that makes us look bad? Well, there's some of it's easy. And frankly, some of it's not. There are some that I had no idea until I had to actually ask the bartenders, and they were like, "Yeah, XYZ," and you're like, "Wow, really? That? Oh, okay, all right, cool." So first thing you need to know, when you go into an izakaya or a bar, you are going to be charged a table charge. That's going to happen. So izakayas, it's usually 300 to 500 yen, roughly about $3 to $5. Bars, it's about 500 yen. So it's gonna happen. So deal with it. Now, why do they do that? Think of it like a cover charge. You ever been to kind of a fancy bar or whatever, and they're like, it's cover charge to get in? It's kind of the same thing. But there's a difference. Over here, cover charge is literally, hey, here's the money, Mr. Bouncer, don't beat me up and let me inside. Over there, it's, hey, yeah, I'm paying for my seat, but I also get something in return. So what you get in return there in an izakaya is, usually little cutlets of meat or whatever, usually off cutlets, little bits of liver or whatever. If you're not into that, it is what it is. But you get something for it, something usually fairly tasty. In bars, you pay that charge, you got unlimited bar snacks just about. Obviously you don't make that your main meal, but when that bowl is empty, that bartender is going to fill that, and that's how they afford that, is that cover charge. Excuse me, the table charge. Now, when you're at a bar and you each have your own individual bill, it's usually 500 yen per person. Now, obviously, if you got one guy out there and they're paying for everything, usually the bartender's like, all right, just 500 for this one bill. So you don't have to worry about that. When it comes to bad manners, sharing a drink over there, yeah, you can do it. Okay, don't get me wrong. But one thing that irritates the hell out of bartenders in Japan is people will sit down, and it happens all the time. From what I understand, it happens all the time with specifically Americans and Canadians. I don't think others do it, but these are the ones that they told me. Anyways, people will sit down, and then they'll order one drink for a group, and then they'll share that drink. That's a big no-no. You do not do that there, period. You sit down at the bar, you get a drink. Now, they would prefer that drink to be alcohol, but obviously, some people who have like liver conditions or whatever, they can't drink, so they'll get like a soda or something along those lines. After that drink, most bartenders don't give a crap if you share or not. but you have to pay for at least one drink. Each person has to have at least one drink in most cases. And, well, why do they do that? Well, because the bars are quite small, and if you have 8 people clogging up an 8-person bar and only one person's buying friggin' drinks and they're there for a couple of hours, that bartender's not making any money. So don't be a jerk. Be considerate. Buy a drink. One very, very interesting one that I never really thought of there, that a couple of bartenders told me that they absolutely despise is people who dip. They say, like, I mean, you can, in Osaka, for example, you can smoke pretty much just about wherever you want. It's a little bit different in places like Tokyo where they have like designated smoking areas and stuff like that. But Osaka, for the most part, obviously if you're not on public transport or something like that, if you're out in the public, you'll usually find people smoking outside of convenience stores or whatever, or in restaurants and bars, and that's just kind of is what it is. Smoking, they don't give a shit about that. What they do care about is dipping. You get that big old wad of tobacco in your mouth and you just spit it out, and they frickin' despise that. Because it's gross, first of all. And second of all, where are you spitting it? In their bar. Spitting on something is never seen as good manners. So don't do it. If you dip, just wait until you get out of the bar. Another thing that is a pet peeve with some of the bartenders is you guys got to keep in mind, obviously not everybody over there speaks English. Duh. Now, in my personal experience, I have dealt with many, many wonderful people in Japan who, once you speak just even basic Japanese to them, they open up and they speak as good of English as they can possibly do. Okay? And yes, I've run into a couple of the jerks who are like, oh, you don't speak Japanese, then I won't speak to you at all. Yes, that happens. But, that kind of is what it is everywhere around the world. But if you're dealing with a bartender or somebody in an izakaya or anybody really in the service industry there, if their English isn't the best, try to speak slowly to them. Like, and I don't mean, talk to them like they're, a child with brain damage. I mean, like, just kind of slowly talk to them, use your hands for words, things like that. And the reason why is because the thing that's more embarrassing to most Japanese people is not the fact that you're talking slow to them. The embarrassment is that they're not able to help you because you're talking too fast. And they get embarrassed by that. They really feel awful because they want to help you, but they can't understand you. Therefore, they can't help you. And over there, if you can't help somebody, you're basically useless. So do them a favor. Obviously, if they come up to you and are like, hey, what's up, buddy? I've been, and they talk, really good English, then, speak normally. But if they're kind of slow with the English, be slow back. And that's okay. There's no problem with that. Okay, so let's see here. I think I went through pretty much everything. Holy crap, I've been recording for almost 30 minutes. That's longer than I thought. Let's see here. What can I talk about next? Well, let me tell you about one story and then I'll go. Maybe it'll end up being 2. Who knows? Let's see where the moment takes me. Anyways, so one time when I was in Osaka, I went to Bar Laughing, as I talked about before, and the bartender / bar owner, his name is Yamazaki-san. So Yamazaki-san. Well, that was interesting to find out because my favorite whiskey, period, is Yamazaki whiskey. No, he does not own that. However, when I was there, he asked me, he was trying to be polite and friendly to me because I was the first foreigner to walk into his place in a very long time. And, he said, hey, what do you want? I was like, oh, I'll take a beer for now. What kind of whiskey do you have? Oh, okay, cool. Well, I like, he runs through like Jim Beam and all that. And I go, actually, I like Japanese whiskey. And he goes, really? I'm like, yeah. Well, I really like Yamazaki whiskey. And he goes, oh, well, Yamazaki is my name. I was like, oh, cool. That's awesome. So I would actually like to have some of that. So he went and got Yamazaki Private Reserve, which you can only get from the Yamazaki distillery, which is not very close to Osaka. Let's just put it that way. So he's basically giving me his private reserve, essentially. Now, me and him, or him and I, were drinking, little bits of that, and there was another patron that was there, and I ended up becoming very good friends with him as well. I won't use his name because I don't have permission to use his name. I have permission to use Yamazaki-san's name, but not his. So I will refer to him as Aniki. That is not his name. Anyways, so Aniki gets involved in the drinking process with us. I bought him a bit of the Yamazaki whiskey. So we start going back and forth, and he gets me a Jim Beam, etc. And basically, Yamazaki-san decided to open up more, and he goes, I know that I know you understand your Japanese liquor quite well. How do you feel about trying some Nihonshu that I have? And I was like, really? You have some? And he goes, yeah. I actually just got 3 of these bottles of Nihonshu. I've never tried them. And I want to know if they're any good, because if they're good, then I want to order these and I can, sell them to my regular customers. So what he essentially just offered me was free alcohol, basically because he wanted me to be a guinea pig more than anything. But he wanted me to test it and say, yes, this is good, or no, that's not good. So I figure, these are, small little bottles. No, they are not. They are called one shot, but they are definitely not one shot. They have at least 10 shots of this Nihonshu / sake in them. And we ended up killing all 3 of those bottles between me, Aniki, and Yamazaki-san. So that's 3 people. And Yamazaki-san wasn't drinking that much of it because, well, he had to run the bar. So after that, apparently I say apparently because I don't remember much after that. But apparently I chose the better of the Nihonshus. He ordered more of that. Karaoke broke out. That was cool. There are no karaoke machines in that bar. So that was a thing. And the next thing I remember is being loaded into a taxi at right around 6 or 7 in the morning, and then dealing with the worst hangover of my friggin' life the next day. But, you play hard, you gotta pay hard. By the way, there's another common misconception out there that sake or Nihonju does not give you a hangover. That's a little crap. That's not even close to true. Anyways, I think I've rambled on long enough for this one. I'm sorry that the structure is all over the place. I'm still trying to kind of figure this whole thing out. The bullet points definitely helped quite a bit. So maybe next week, just depending on when I actually do this, think I'm going to go over either food culture or Japanese nightlife. I haven't really decided on that one. I'll let you guys kind of figure that one out. And if you don't choose, then I'll choose, and you just kind of have to deal with it. Maybe Japanese nightlife. I might do that one. Anyways. Also, I am in the market at the moment. I need an actual background. I can't just use this single photo forever. I need to have a logo designed for Raijin Radio. And if anybody out there can help me with that, that'd be great. So just feel free to send me a message, and I'll go ahead and take a look at it, and we'll see what we got here. So, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I will talk to you all later. Raijin Radio and Ryan signing out.